And we are back on the 0 hour. This is Richard RJ Eskow, and as we continue to dig out the rubble of the November election, here to help us decode that now is one of the smartest people I know in this area. Celinda Lake is president of Lake Research Partners. She's one of the Democratic Party's leading political strategists. And, you know, I could list all her credits, but they're good. And she knows her stuff. So we'll get right to it. First of all, Celinda, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I'm so glad. And, you know, first of all, as we look back now, I mean, I kind of felt like after the voting, maybe people needed a little time before we really delved into what went wrong. You know, there's a lot of frayed sensibilities right now. People are kind of snapping at each other. But I really think it's important to get beyond that and analyze just what happened. And you have written about that, and I thought your thoughts on it were particularly cogent. So why don't we start there? You've done some research on this. Why did this election turn out the way it did?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I can appreciate the desire to snap, but I agree with you. What we need to do is solve, not snap. So there were a number of factors. The first factor is turnout. We did see a surge in turnout among Trump voters. There was a secret Trump vote. We did see a surge of rural voters. Now, obviously, we still won the popular vote, but not distributed in the places that, as long as we had the Electoral College, mattered. And we, all of us had the wrong turnout models in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania. Our base turned out less and was less consolidated.
Now,
so groups of voters.
If you don't mind my jumping in from time and asking, why was that? We had, that seems to me to be a critical element, that Democratic base voters didn't turn out where they needed to in these swing states. And you also mentioned the models didn't work. Those, to me, I mean, they're obviously reflective of the same underlying or connected underlying issues. What happened there? Why didn't they come out?
Well, I think there are a number of factors. One is that, you know, in some cases we may have had unrealistic models. African-American voters very supportive of Hillary Clinton, but it's not the same as having an African-American candidate. Mm-hmm. Two, I believe we need to give voters something to vote for, not just something to vote against. Three, I think we suffered a great deal from not having an economic message. And I think that's the number one thing we need to fix. And it affected persuasion, the swing voters, and it affected turnout for millennials, for unmarried women. And four, I think that we took for granted that there would be high turnout and demographic destiny was changing places, and we underestimated the degree to which we needed to work that vote. We needed to ask people for their vote, and we needed to do it more than just the last weekend.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think what you're referring to there, Celinda Lake, is what they call in some Democratic circles the rising Democratic electorate, the
rising American electorate.
Rising American electorate. That, but you know, I feel like it's a souffle. If you don't cook it properly, it's not going to rise.
Great. That is great. That's a great. I'm going to steal that. You're absolutely right.
No
chocolate. The dough doesn't rise without yeast.
Yeah. So, and I feel that what you said couldn't be more on the money. That, you know, without a strong economic message, that you're not going to get all the voters you need to come out and really turn things around. Now, I get a lot of pushback on this. I got a lot of people basically saying, you know, it was racism, and I'm sure racism was a factor, although I don't understand why it would be
a factor.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure why it would be a bigger factor this year than previous years, but maybe economic fear, maybe just the racists were motivated to come out to vote by Trump, and sexism was certainly a factor. But I feel as if what you said is critical, and I don't know, you know, I can only theorize why there's so much pushback on this issue. It seems to me that when the message, I'm competent and I will steer the ship with a steady hand, is not compelling when you don't like where the ship is going, and people, if your
Well,
life
that's
is
right.
so.
There are a lot of voters that did a Hail Mary for change. And, we talked about personality characteristics. In the end of the day, the top personality characteristic was change. Beat out caring, beat out temperament, beat out qualified. 39% of the voters said the number one thing they voted for was change, and they voted 85% for Donald Trump. We were really hampered in terms of our economic message by the division within our party. This economy is not in good shape for most Americans, and we refuse to acknowledge that. And we have to go back to the way that Bill Clinton used to talk about it when he said, I've created these jobs, but it's not good enough. Not until everyone has a job they can raise their family on.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And you said something very interesting about this, which you touched on again just now, which is you said, and the way you put it earlier was, there's real anger and frustration in the electorate with the status quo. And you said something. You used an interesting phrase, Celinda. Like you said, they took great risks for change. I mean, that
Right.
I hear so many Democrats disparaging the voters right now, which I think for a variety of reasons is a grave mistake, but for different reasons, including the nonverbal messages you send to voters. But it almost makes it sound courageous.
Well, I don't know if it's courageous or not, but it's, Americans are always change oriented. That's our heritage, right? And we vote more the direction of things, honestly, than we do the actual state of things. And I think in the end, there were, one of the impacts of the Comey letters was that it really made Hillary Clinton the status quo politically, and people were just going to reject the status quo.
Yeah, it almost seems, whether it was coordinated or not, that old political trick of you find your own negatives and you paint your opponent with it. That
Right.
that
Right.
that he did he and Comey, by whom I mean Trump and Comey or whomever, did a great job of tarring her with that. And speaking of Comey, I mean, I would assume he had a significant effect on the outcome. Would you agree with that?
There hasn't been a lot of data on that, but I do agree with that. And I think that the first letter in particular, the second letter, just kept the issue alive. It, by either choice or circumstance, it deflected Hillary Clinton from ending on the message she should have ended on, which is a positive alternative on the economy. And it really motivated a lot of voters to vote for change, and it depressed turnout. I think it was a demotivator for millennials and some of the unmarried women, et cetera.
Yeah, I wondered about that. That makes sense to me, certainly. But I also wonder, as you know probably far better than I, there is enormous debate going on now within the Democratic Party about where to go, how to go forward from here. And I'd love your thoughts on this, Celinda, but, basically I feel you can't just talk about Comey or WikiLeaks.
No.
You have to kind of say the serenity prayer here, change the things I can. Right? I don't know. Do you agree with that? I mean, I feel that, yes.
I totally do.
Yeah.
And there are two things that we have to explain. We have to remember that it wasn't just Hillary Clinton's loss. We got devastated up and down the ticket. We lost Senate. We lost state legislatures we've held for 100 years. We lost the lower statewide. We lost governorships in places like Missouri. We got beat really deeply and really badly. And so Comey is not a sufficient explanation for that. And I think one of the things that is an important explanation, the two things are, demography is destiny, but only if people turn out to vote.
Right.
And two, we have to have an economic message. People will not vote for Democrats if we don't stand for something economically. And an economic message is not 11 bills you would introduce and 7 programs. It's an overall economic orientation and frame, and we need to establish that, repeat it, and run across it at all levels of the party.
Well, I think that's very well said. And I would also say an economic message is not telling people who are experiencing struggle, your life is good enough. And I feel that there was an element of that in the message, that look at how good the top line numbers are, look at how good the top line employment
Mm-hmm.
number is, look at how good the overall growth has been, as opposed to your specific life, the one you, the voter, are expert in, may not be that good, and here's what I'm going to do about it.
Right. And the other thing is, it doesn't matter what the facts are. It matters what people's perceptions of the facts are. You can't argue facts with people's real lived experience. And what real voters conclude is these economists are completely out of touch. And I can't assure my kids, 75% of Americans said their kids are going to be worse off. 65% of Americans said the country is going into recession in the next 4 years. And a solid majority of Americans said they're not better off, that they're suffering badly from rising costs of living and stagnant wages. You cannot tell these people that the statistics say you're better off. Well, people don't care what statistics say. They
Right.
care what their own real lived experience is.
Right. It's like a doctor telling you you feel well when you don't feel well.
That's right.
I guess where we are now is, do you get the sense, this would be to me, you ran through the numbers, the Democrats are at a crisis stage. They'd be at a crisis stage even if they hadn't lost to a party whose policies are unpopular and whose ticket wasn't headed by somebody people thought was basically unstable. So to me, this is doubly devastating loss for that. Do you have
Right.
the sense that Democrats have an understanding as an institution, the party, that it needs to really reevaluate its economic message and its overall direction?
Well, I think that there is a debate about it, but I do think that people realize that something very serious has happened. Um, and I'm hoping, what's interesting is when the Republicans were in this crisis, they really did have a very serious evaluation phase, and I hope we will do the same. And we have great opportunity in 2018, but a tough electorate. We have 36 governorships up. We have to gain some, hold our Senate seats, hopefully gain a couple in very bad terrain. So we really have to get better position. We have to get some of these state legislatures back because we're facing reapportionment in 2020. So the stakes are very, very high, and I hope we will do the kind of serious evaluation that we need to.
Well, when I sit alone in my room at night worrying about where this country's going, I'm glad they're listening to people like you. And Celinda Lake, head of Lake Research Partners, thanks so much for your insights, and thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you so much, and I'm delighted to have been on the program.
Great. We will be right back after this. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.